Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Jordan Rutter, Director of Communications for American Bird Conservancy and your host today. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you afterward. We'll be putting links in the chat, but in case you missed them, please know that we'll be sending an email to everyone who registered, and it'll contain all of the links referenced today, as well as a link to the recording. Automated captions are available for this webinar, and you can turn them on by clicking on the CC icon on your screen. Please submit any questions you have during the presentations using the Q&A box so we can track those. Birds inspire and delight us. They fill us with wonder and joy. They do so much from pollination to pest control, but birds are in trouble and they're disappearing fast. Thanks to generous supporters from people like you, ABC works with diverse partners throughout the Western Hemisphere to prevent imminent bird extinctions, improve millions of acres of habitat with bird-friendly management practices, and advocate for and create innovative solutions to urgent threats that put birds at risk. And together, we're achieving results. Over the past 30 years, ABC has conserved 3,000 bird species and 10 million acres of habitat for birds across the Americas. But the challenges facing birds are more urgent than ever, and that's why American Bird Conservancy is taking bold action for birds in 2025, and we need your help. Your tax-deductible gift will make it possible for ABC to conserve bird habitat, as well as prevent extinctions, reverse population declines, reduce threats for birds, and build an inclusive and equitable future for bird conservation. Together, we can do even more to save wild birds and the habitats they need to thrive. Will you consider making a gift now to make a difference for wild birds across the Americas? Please visit abcbirds.org/give or scan the code you see on the screen with your phone right now. I know this is the first free ABC webinar for many of you, and welcome. We are so glad that you're with us right now. If you join ABC today at a special introductory rate of $35 or more, we're going to send you our brand new exclusive ABC hat. This beautiful dark green hat features the ABC hummingbird on the front and is a wonderful way to show everyone that you care about bird conservation as you enjoy some spring birding. And maybe you'll meet some fellow ABC supporters in the field when you do. This offer is available to new and returning members, and thanks to a generous match from the Richard and Anne Marie Rowse Charitable Foundation, all new and returning memberships and gifts from ABC supporters willing to give over and above their usual support will be matched dollar for dollar up to $200,000. So please don't miss this way to increase your impact for birds across the Americas, and visit abcbirds.org/give now or scan the code on your screen to give. Thank you so much for being here to learn how to help birds across the Americas thrive, and special thanks to all of you ABC members and supporters in the audience today. You are having a powerful impact on bird conservation throughout the Western Hemisphere. But seriously, don't miss this offer. This is a great hat. As someone who is very picky about hats, it's awesome when you're birding. And it even has the ABC logo in the back. But back to warblers. So welcome again, friends, to our Warbler webinar, or as we're fond of calling it at ABC, our Warblinar. And we're here today to celebrate the jewels of spring migration in North America, warblers. It's easy to understand why these birds are so beloved. They can be found in a range of habitats, sing distinctive songs, and often spot bright colors. And many are long-distant migrants whose return to the continent is a highly anticipated and welcome sign of spring. The warbler family has more than 100 members, and many helpfully contain warbler in their common name, but today's Warblinar is specifically highlighting birds that you may not even know are warblers. But I promise you that no matter their name, they're just as sweet. And if you need a quick pick-me-up, it doesn't get much better than looking at some Ovenbird photos like the one in my background. Warblers charm new and experienced birders alike and challenge them too. There's a reason that warbler neck is a named affliction in the birding community. But what makes a warbler exactly? And if there are billions, with a B, of them migrating through North America as we speak, why can they be so difficult to observe? Let's dive deep into the wonders of warblers, the important roles that they play in our ecosystems, the challenges that they face, and how we can all help them right now today. and conserve these little spring songsters. I'm so fortunate to be joined by two wonderful colleagues today, so let's meet our speakers. First up, we have Ann Minnie, who is ABC's Lower Mississippi Valley Joint Venture Science Coordinator. Ann coordinates strategic planning and research to develop a shared vision of bird conservation for the Lower Mississippi Valley region. Ann has a PhD from Oregon State University, where she studied dusky Canada and cackling geese, and a master's from Humboldt State University, where she studied Aleutian cackling geese. And she's worked at a variety of national wildlife refuges, including the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge and Klamath Basin National Wildlife Refuge Complex. Linnea Rowse is ABC's Great Lakes Private Lands Director, and she is the she is an avid birder and has worked in conservation field for more than 15 years with work experiences including avian breeding ecology fieldwork, migratory bird stopover habitat research, and habitat management and restoration for forest and grassland birds. She has a master's in environment and natural resources from the Ohio State University and a bachelor's in wildlife and conservation biology from the University of Rhode Island. And last but not least is me, Jordan Rutter. You already know me as your webinar host and now as one of today's speakers, but I'm also Director of Communications at American Bird Conservancy and a lifelong birder. Yes, I did in fact experience warbler neck at a very early age, and I can confirm that even kids can experience the pains and joys from it. But I went on to get my master's degree from the University of Minnesota, focused on Great Lakes piping plovers and science communication. And I've been doing bird stuff literally forever, and always with a passion for helping folks like you learn more and connect with birds, as we all want to work together to conserve them. But enough about me. Let's get on to the warblers. So warblers, warblers, it's quite a mouthful to say and to sing, but that's why we're here today. So there's this incredible group of birds that are known for this. They make a name for it. So wool is a type of song, therefore we have warblers. But this group is fast. There don't name or identifier. Why? We're going to dig into that now. So again, what exactly then is a warbler? They're everything, especially in spring. Can I just leave it at that? No, but why recreate the wheel when I can quote a classic expert, David Sibley, who has a very well-known popular field guide. And according to him, in the warbler section of that field guide, it includes the following. Warblers are small and active birds with short pointed bills. Plumage is varied. In general, tree trop species are brightly colored and ground dwelling species are drab. It goes on to say, compared to vireos and kinglets. So what does all of that mean? And again, how do birds without the name warbler relate? Let's explore this a little bit more. The warblers are all small. All warblers are small. They tend to be in that general size area between hummingbirds, which are the smallest, and sparrows, which sometimes, as you can see on the slide, are a little bit more chunky. Warblers tend to be really slim. They're also only a few inches long from the tip of their beaks to the tip of their tails, and they only weigh a few grams. The trick with grams and understanding what that is one standard paper clip is a gram, 2 nickels is 10 grams, and a full stick of butter is 100 grams. So warblers only average about 10 grams, again, 2 nickels, and they're making these incredible journeys throughout the year. And in some cases, maybe not. We're gonna see that later on. But again, they're pretty small. And that can be a real challenge for when you want to actually identify them in the field or even just see them. So where do they fit then in the family tree of all birds? So they are part of one of the largest mega families of birds called passerines or even songbirds because of the sounds that they make. And so warblers are in that family. So as you can see on the slide, which is a super generalized graphic, they're farthest away from relating to, say, ostriches, but they are most related to other backyard birds that you might have, like cardinals or jays even. So the other thing to know about warblers is that there are Western Hemisphere warblers and there are Eastern Hemisphere warblers. We, of course, are focusing on Western Hemisphere at American Bird Conservancy. We focus on the Americas. And so scientifically speaking, those warblers are in the family Parulidae, and that's what has over 100 species. Interestingly enough, our warblers in the Americas tend to be more colorful, and they tend to have a lot more cool facts than the Eastern Hemisphere warblers, which tend to be more drab. And we're going to get into some of those relationships in a little bit as well. But interestingly as well, the Western Hemisphere species were originally described and even called flycatchers as scientists were moving across the Americas and starting to describe these to Western science. They were relating them to the birds that they knew back in the Eastern Hemisphere from Europe and Africa. And so based off of things like the bristles on the beaks of our warblers, the similar feeding habits, and again, just trying to describe things based off of what you know, the Eastern Hemisphere warblers were originally described as flycatchers, and now we know that they're totally different. So that's pretty cool. So warblers, we've again been mentioning there's 100 plus of them. There's basically one for everyone and every situation. There's one for every color of the rainbow, except purple. And I have no explanation to share with you, but I think that's pretty interesting to think about. They have all different markings. They have all different sounds. They're literally the most diverse group of birds. Again, these flying jewels in springtime, they bring this brightness, both visually and via sound, to us here in the US and Canada, especially. And it's so fascinating to look at them in terms of, you know, they have what looks like fancy makeup and maybe even mascara on, such as this Townsend's warbler on the screen. There's some that you may never have even heard of before. They are just incredible in terms of bird diversity. And so again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more to learn about, and each one deserves its own time and attention. And just its own integral celebration for it being the bird that it is and the evolutionary history that it has to date. So these are warblers. Again, warbler in the name. We have things like pink-headed warbler, we have black-throated blue warbler, but what about these other birds? So names are arbitrary and people put names on these birds, right? We want to be able to communicate and describe them. It makes total sense, but that's how we get some of these discrepancies. And so it ultimately comes down to science and genetics. And so where are these birds like parulas and common yellowthroats and water thrushes? How do they all fit? It goes back to that family tree, basically. So on the next slide, we have just an overview of these birds that, again, based off of genetics, based off of research, you know, helping us with taxonomy and understanding of how birds relate, these are warblers too. So don't judge a bird by its name. They have so much incredibleness going on beneath that name. So where can, when can we see them? I keep saying about spring migration. The thing is that for us in the US and Canada, spring and then fall is definitely the best time to see them, but technically you can see them year round, at least specific species. So again, it comes down to your specific context, where you are, when you're birding and everything. But in the spring, for these birds right now, crack of dawn, you really got to get up early in the morning, right when the sun hits the tops of those trees. And the reason for that is, one, it typically is a quiet time of day. So these male birds really want to sing as loud as they can. They want to practice and then attract a mate, but they also want that warmth to warm up the bugs that they eat. So that time of day is really ideal. Now, interestingly enough, it is fascinating that birds tend to have an afternoon nap as well. So midday when the sun is super high tends to be really quiet and not quite as ideal to see these birds, but it's still possible. And also research is indicating that female birds are singing a lot more than originally thought. And it's a really quickly advancing area of ornithology. that bird science. And it's fascinating to think through just what are they saying, and what does bird communication still have to unveil in terms of all of these discoveries, which is really, really cool. So what do they sound like? So the world's natural soundtrack is a dawn chorus, if you ask me. It's this harmonious collection of all the different species of birds, all singing, not actually coordinated, and yet it sounds beautiful. It again is right at that crack of day, and you have everything from high trills by northern parulas, whistly songs like American redstarts, repeat phrases made by ovenbirds. You have words that you can put to certain sounds, songs like witchety, witchety, witchety for common yellowthroats, and so many more. Each one is so beautiful and complex. I really encourage you to check out our website to learn more for each species right now. But ultimately, the big takeaway is just that the dawn chorus is wonderful, and that alone deserves our attention, to conserve birds, because we want to make sure that that dawn chorus never stops playing. So where can you see these warblers? The incredible thing is across the Americas. So these eastern warblers, again over 100, are technically all over the hemisphere. Again, there are warblers in the eastern hemisphere, so you could say there are warblers all over the globe, but those are cousins. So focusing on the eastern hemisphere warblers, you can go from Canada down to Argentina and Chile and be able to see warblers depending on when and where you go. The point here is just that vastness, right? Thinking about just the spread and variety of warblers. Now, are they residential or migratory? Given how many different species there are, this is the why not both situation. We have some warblers that love to stay put. We have some warblers that are endemic. And endemic means that they are really tied to a specific place, and that place only in the entire world. You can't find them anywhere else, which means why habitat conservation is so crucial. It's literally life-saving, because without that habitat, without that safe home area protected, these birds would be in even more trouble. Now, comparatively, what you might have heard as neotropical migrants or migratory warblers, these are athletes of the most impressive feat. These birds will travel thousands of miles potentially, connecting places that you wouldn't think of otherwise. They connect the US and Canada to those South American countries as well. And so that's this just incredible moment of spring migration when these birds are finally arriving for us here in the US and Canada. You think they made it. It's like when a runner ends a marathon almost. But they're only here for such a brief moment of time that it deserves that celebration and joy. In the US and Canada, there are these 4 flyways, and these are the pathways that both warblers and other migratory birds tend to take. There's 4 distributed across the country, north to south, and they're basically highways in the sky. As you can see on the map on the screen, they really follow coastlines, then mountain ranges, then rivers and other natural features. And these are where birds naturally are finding the easiest places to migrate, or these hot spots, or stopover sites where they find those little pit stops along their long journeys to find fuel, to eat and gain weight back up, and to rest before ending at their breeding or non-breeding site in the fall. Okay, so the really cool thing about birding right now, in terms of both the scientific aspect, the conservation aspect, and just enjoying birds, is tracking. So ABC is the US lead on MODIS, and we're partnering with Birds Canada, which is the Canadian lead, on this initiative geared at putting basically little backpacks with a tracking device on the birds, many of which are warblers, in order to get insight to their movements like never before. We're actually able to track these birds and see exactly, it's like if you had a map route, instead of just having point A and point B, we're able to better inform conservation efforts as well as have all of these scientific marvels unraveled before our eyes. And so therefore we're learning more about the warblers as well. But from that birder and appreciation standpoint, we're able to track these birds so we can enjoy them. And the fascinating thing is that there's literally so many of them, again, billions with a B, making up so much biomass. Just think of how much size and weight all of these birds make up. That during peak migration, weather radar is actually able to detect them, and we're able to have this insight to their movements as well. So on the screen, you're able to actually see what looks, it's different colors, but what would be a weather radar map. And it's fascinating to think that they are having as big of an impact as a rainstorm across the country. So I encourage you to check out our website for more information on how to actually track where these birds are and how you can actually, observe them in real time. Okay, so more specifically, what's the habitat? Where can you go? So warblers are everywhere. Again, there's so many that even our backyards make up crucial habitat as well. You can't take for granted your area, whether it's your own backyard or your community park. These areas, again, are really important areas for where birds are refueling, stopping and resting, and maybe even stopping to nest. Um, the warblers tend to focus on forests and shrubs, not grassy lawn suburbs though. And there tends to be a divide between those warblers that like treetops, such as northern parulas, and those that are ground dwellers like ovenbirds. And so this is also my place to better explain what warbler neck is. So for the species that like the tops of trees, again, like northern parulas, you have to crane your neck up in order to be able to look all the way to the top of the trees. And it can give you some pain, but again, it can bring so much joy when you actually get to see these little feathered jewels. So that tends to be the habitat that is most on average, again, those forests and shrubs. But where are these birds coming from? Where, they're moving north right now for spring migration. Where are they coming from? And a lot of them are coming from coffee farms and other agricultural areas in Central and South America. So it's really important to remember that you and your morning cup of coffee are connected to warblers. I really encourage you to learn more about bird-friendly coffee and the ABC Birds Plus program. We're doing a lot of really innovative work right now to learn about how to scale up these areas of agricultural use, land use, and make sure that the birds are taken into consideration so that the practices can be harmonious between the agricultural needs as well as the bird needs. It's really fascinating, so make sure you check it out. Okay, so then where are these birds going? The boreal forest, which is in northern Canada, is known as the songbird nursery of the Americas. This habitat is full of bugs. One of the reasons why this is such an incredible place is just like I was saying, the biomass of the birds. In the springtime in the boreal forest, there's this incredible eruption of insects, which provide enough protein and just food in general to fuel that next generation of all of those chicks from these birds. So the boreal forest is really important to be aware of as well. It seems to be out of sight, out of mind sometimes because of how remote it is, but it's such critical habitat for all of these birds. So going back to your yard and how it fits in, right? Again, it's the stepping stone for birds between point A and point B. So we can't take it for granted. And we want to make sure that your yard is just as safe as can be for warblers and any bird in that area. So there's a lot of actions you can take, even ones right now today that don't cost any money, such as keeping your cats inside or safely contained when outside. But don't take for granted other things like native plants and no pesticides. treating your windows. Unfortunately, collisions is a huge aspect of a threat that birds, and especially warblers, face all the time. Over 1 billion birds are hitting windows in the US alone every year. And warblers somehow are especially susceptible. There's many species that are known as super colliders just based off of the frequency. Like on the next slide, there's a black and white warbler at a window. And a large part of it is because, again, of those flyways. If you look at a map that has the cities actually marked on them, you'll see that a lot of major cities, thinking about everything from Miami to DC and so on, they follow along these flyway pathways. And those cities then have a lot of glass that the birds have to navigate. It's the worst obstacle course that they could possibly endure. And yet we have solutions here at ABC and ways for you to help mitigate your windows and reduce those collisions. So I keep talking about bugs as well. And this is where we have to remember to reduce pesticides, because you want to make sure that the saying, "you are what you eat," is not pesticides for birds, but those big juicy protein packets, basically, of caterpillars and spiders and so on. So most warblers are like 98% insectivores. There's always some exceptions. So make sure that if you do have feeders out, you keep an eye, because they might stop by. But also remember that feeders are a responsibility. So on our website, we have a lot of tips and tricks for how to make sure that your feeders are clean and hygienic for the birds, and different types of food to put out that might attract other birds as well. But again, you want to remember that native plants help support insects, right? So it goes from the plants to the insects to the birds. So you can't take that for granted. And also reducing pesticides helps reduce that threat to birds in order to survive, and then have those chicks survive too. So speaking of surviving and how long do these birds live, most of our migratory warblers are lucky to survive even their first year. Again, that obstacle course during migration and just the physical toll alone is so hard that they tend not to have very long lives. However, if they can overcome those threats, if they can, benefit from our conservation actions, whether it's at home or through organizations and reserves, birds can live a much longer time. The oldest yellow-rumped warbler has been known to be over 10 years old based off of banding records. And I think that's really the goal of what we all want to achieve. We want these birds to live really long lives so that we can enjoy them and they can make lots of chicks for us to keep enjoying them. But again, so many threats. But it doesn't have to be that way, because we have a really engaged audience that wants to take action for birds right now. And there are so many ways. Whether you're a 5-year-old learning about the impact of cats and making sure you're a responsible pet owner, whether you're an adult and want to use your voice to speak up and make sure that we have bird-friendly legislation, or a very variety of ways that you can take action inside and outside of your home. I really encourage you to do that. And of course, ultimately, supporting ABC, making sure that you get this hat, is a really good way to help warblers, especially because of our mission to conserve birds and their habitats across the Americas. We're so comprehensive that we've got you covered. So thank you so much. And we're gonna now move on to Anne.
All right, thank you, Jordan. I will get my presentation up. All right, thank y'all. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Louisiana waterthrush. But first, I would like to just take a minute to talk about what a waterthrush is in general. So surprise, it's not a thrush, it's a warbler. They're actually in 2 different families. So warblers, as Jordan mentioned, are in Parulidae, and the true thrushes are in a separate family, Turdidae. And so thrushes are things like American robins or Swainson's thrush. So water thrush, they are associated with water. So that's where that part of the name came from, kind of throughout their annual cycle. And they also do have a thrush-like appearance. So you can compare this to, say here, a Swainson's thrush. And what you'll see is that they're both kind of large brown. The thrushes tend to be a larger bird, but they have that same brown color. They spend a lot of time on the ground. And so you can kind of see where water thrush came from. There are only two species in their genus Parkesia. There is the Louisiana water thrush and the northern water thrush. Ovenbird used to be included with these two, but it went to a different genus. And so, like I say, I'm going to focus on Louisiana water thrush, but I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about appearance differences between these two water thrushes, and then some range differences as well. All right, so they're both brown, right? So how the heck do you tell these two apart? Well, when you're out in the field trying to ID them, Louisiana water thrush, and we often use a 4-letter code to kind of use a shorthand to identify them, the LOA. They tend to have a bigger eye stripe, and it tends to be wider compared to a buffier and kind of smaller eye stripe on the northern water thrush. And then you can also use that in conjunction with their throat color. So the Louisiana water thrush have a white throat, whereas the northerns have streaking on their throat, and they tend to just be more streaky overall. So those are, using that in combination is kind of a good way to visually ID them. But there's also some range differences as well. And so I'll give you all a minute to think about which one might be which is northern, which is Louisiana. But the northern water thrush, if you guessed that, you're correct, here on the right, has a more northern breeding distribution. And so you can see the Louisiana water thrush in the breeding time is largely restricted to kind of the eastern half of the United States. And there's differences in where you'll find them on migration, or when they're down on the rest of the non-breeding grounds, kind of the wintering grounds. So if you're up here in Alaska during the breeding season, you're pretty much guaranteed it's going to be a northern water thrush that you are seeing. All right, so now to talk about water thrush, one of my favorite warblers. So their scientific name is Parkesia motacilla. And that last part of the scientific name really speaks to a behavior that you can actually use to identify them. So when they're out foraging around, they kind of bob their tail and their back end, like a wagtail, so to speak. So you can use that. As Jordan mentioned, warblers, they're all small, but Louisiana water thrush is one of the larger warblers. It's about twice the size of a yellow warbler. They are ground foragers. So what they do is they go into streams and forage for aquatic invertebrates, macroinvertebrates, things like dragonfly larvae. They're also a ground nesting warbler. So they nest in like tree roots or the side of stream banks or under ferns, anything closely associated with water. Louisiana water thrush tend to be one of our earliest warbler migrants, both for arrival and departure. I frequently see them in March as they're coming through my area. And I've seen reports on eBird where even like the last day in February, people have seen them like around the leap year. So they're pretty early migrants. Their population is stable, which is great, right? We'd like to see that. But it's relatively small. It's about 500,000 individuals. And I say relative because if you compare this, say, to the northern water thrush, that has a population of about 17 million birds. All right, so water thrush, Louisiana water thrush have one of my favorite bird songs. And so I'm going to take a minute to play that for you, but it's also a great way to identify them. And so they start with a series of descending notes. And then the best way that I can describe it is it kind of ends up in this jumbled mess at the end. And here, listen to it and you'll kind of see what I mean. And one more time. So hopefully you all kind of understand what I mean. When they get to this end, it's kind of a series of hurried notes in there. But this is very easy way to identify water thrush, Louisiana water thrush, when you're out in the field. There are other birds that have some similar song patterns, but one way you can tell them apart is, like I say, that ending to it. So Swainson's warbler has a beautiful descending song, but a very kind of clear note at the end. It's not that jumbledness. And similarly, yellow-throated warbler has that descending call, but when you get to the end, their last note kind of rises in tone. And northern water thrush doesn't have the same start to their song. So those are just some tips you can use to kind of better identify these birds. All right, so getting into the stuff that I really work on, thinking about habitat. Louisiana water thrush on the breeding grounds are very closely associated with streams, especially small streams. First and second order streams, think of things like headwaters, you know, kind of very small tributaries that feed into larger river systems. They want clear flowing water. They want the water to have been there year round, perennial water, and they prefer a rockier substrate to the stream bed. And so all of this is because it makes ideal conditions for their prey, for those aquatic invertebrates. And water thrush will kind of keep these long linear streams, long linear territories along streams that they defend pretty aggressively from other water thrushes. And then during migration, they actually tend to be a little bit more generalist. You'll find them like in stagnant water. So often where I see water thrush during migration is in cypress swamps. And that is not clear flowing water. That is black, murky water, but it's a good place to see them. You can also see them just in urban parks, or if you're down in the Yucatan in some of the mangroves there. And then once they reach kind of their final terminus on the non-breeding grounds, what I call more the wintering area, their habitat use is similar to the breeding grounds. They're kind of associated with streams and waters feeding on those invertebrates. Threats to Louisiana water thrush. These include habitat loss. So if you think about riparian areas, which are the forested areas along streams, that's really important to water thrush. And they also like to have a lot of forest in the areas that they use. And so large scale deforestation is a threat to these birds. Louisiana water thrush are also sensitive to water quality and stream pollution. And this is primarily because their prey base, those aquatic invertebrates, which signal ecosystem health, are really sensitive to these things as well. And finally, they're very sensitive to changes in hydrology, changes in water flow. Drought, drying up of streams is a threat to them, but even excessive flooding can be bad for them. So part of what I do as a Lower Mississippi Valley joint venture partner and being employed through ABC is kind of think about how can we address these threats? What can we do in terms of habitat actions to help these birds? And so with the science, I kind of sit there and think about where can we focus these actions to either help protect or improve habitat for birds like Louisiana water thrush. And so for Louisiana water thrush, we really focus here in this light green area, this West Gulf coastal plains and Ouachita's area. And so we've used the best available science to identify where on the landscape we think there's the right mix of these things that Louisiana water thrush need. And then we can think about how we can be strategic about conservation actions. So like if you want to do a program to improve water quality, we can look at this map and say, hey, maybe if you focus on this watershed, we can really help improve things for Louisiana water thrush. So when we go about using and developing these scientific tools, we want to make sure that the logic that we're using is pretty sound. And so we need people to go out there and test our science. And so we were so fortunate enough to be able to partner with students and 2 professors at Louisiana Tech University who had a service learning course. And so these students went out into Louisiana water thrush habitat, and they tested all the little assumptions that we made in our modeling. And so they went out and paired audio recordings with habitat quality measurements. So they used these recorders to look at bird song, to listen for bird song, and then see if the habitat was there where we said it would be. And sure enough, when they went out into the habitat, they found that, yep, the areas we said were better quality had the better habitat measurements. And then also where they heard Louisiana water thrush, sure enough, those areas had better habitat for the water thrush. So it was just a really cool way to test some of our science, but it was also a really neat way to hopefully foster some future conservationists. They were working out at the Kisatchie National Forest there in Louisiana. And so this little brown warbler hopefully inspired some students to maybe take a new career in conservation and be exposed to something that they wouldn't have been otherwise. So all the people involved with this project, I just can't say enough good things about them and what they were able to do to help us and help water thrush. So other ways that you as our supporters and listeners can help, as Jordan mentioned, avoiding pesticides. This will help ensure we have the right invertebrates for these species and reduce stream pollution. Drinking bird-friendly coffee will help ensure we have the right habitat for these birds to arrive in. And finally, Louisiana water thrush is a nocturnal migrant. And so turning your lights off and creating dark skies will help them on their journeys. You can do it at home, you can do it with your businesses, wherever you can. All these little steps will help our friends here, like the Louisiana water thrush. And thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. We're going to talk to you at the Q&A at the end, but we're going to welcome Linnea now if you want to get set up.
Let's see, I'll share my screen here. All right.
Take it away.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna hide these meeting quote controls real quick. All right. So thank you all again for your time in joining us today. I will carry us forward here on this Warblinar Part 3. Again, my name is Linnea Rowse, and with ABC, I'm the Great Lakes Private Lands Director. I'm personally located in Michigan, but our team of great foresters and biologists and habitat specialists are located all around the states in the Great Lakes region. Today I'll be sharing some highlights on 3 species of warbler: American redstart, Ovenbird, and common yellowthroat. But before I jump into those 3 species, I'd like to just start with a few strategies to help you with warbler identification, because they are challenging, as both Jordan and Anne have pointed out. So a few key strategies here. When you are out looking for birds, looking for warblers, it's important to look with your eyes, look with your ears, listen with your ears, and note what you're observing, whether that's the birds themselves, the shape, their size, their color, key markings, what they sound like, but also note their habitat and where you're located, even time of year. This is important to remember to take note of, whether that's on paper or just in your head. But look at your field guide or your phone app afterwards, because oftentimes these birds, you just catch a glimpse or a quick snippet of the song and then they're gone, because they're very quick moving. I like to suggest choosing a few species that you might really want to get to know each spring or each year, and get to know those, build from this every year. And that'll help you over time to get to know your warblers. And finally, go birding regularly, especially with others who might know their warblers really well and other birds. It's a great learning opportunity to get out with others in your community. And as Jordan mentioned too, going birding early whether that's early in the day, early in the year, or early in the spring. Get out there often and enjoy it. Now let's take a closer look at the 3 warblers I mentioned, starting with American redstart. American redstart is a very small warbler. They are, the males and the females look different. So males are a nice, rich black color with bright orange patches in their armpits, in their wings, and in their tail. The females and young males they look more of a grayish brown, a grayish green on their back, with yellow patches in their wings, tail, and upper breast. And the immature males, the males in their first year, they will actually start to get some splotches of black in their upper breast, but they won't molt into that full adult male plumage until after their first breeding season. American redstart's tail is a distinctive cue for identification with that band of color across the above the upper part of their tail. And this is related to their foraging strategy, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Also want to mention that oftentimes in Latin America, the American redstarts are called candelita, which means little candle, given their bright plumage. American redstarts, they're currently estimated at 42 million individuals in population, so that's good. That's stable population with only a slight decline across their range. As you can see, again, with their brightly colored plumage, the word for American redstart, the start in their name, is from the Old English word for tail. While they're foraging for insects, they oftentimes flash their tail, they fan it out, they kind of droop their wings. That helps to flush insect prey outwards. And then another adaptation that they have are these very slim whisker-like brittle bristles, the feathers at the base of their bill, that help them to catch insects in flight. American redstarts use shrubby woodland edges for breeding habitat, oftentimes in deciduous young forest. And in the wintering grounds, they are a common visitor to shade-grown coffee farms in Central and South America. Major threats to American redstart include habitat loss and collisions, especially during migration. American redstart's song is fairly variable, which makes it tricky to learn. It's a high-pitched song, and I'm not going to attempt to describe how it sounds, but I'll play the song here in a minute, but listen for the emphatic ending. It can be fairly similar to yellow warbler or black and white warbler, and again, it's variable. So this one recording is not always what they sound like. So when you're out there in the woods, listen for those American redstarts and listen for those other species too as you're learning. Our next species that I'm going to focus on today is the Ovenbird, which at a glance can be mistaken for a thrush. It sort of looks similar to a wood thrush from a distance. However, it is different. When you look a little closer, size for one, warblers are much smaller than the true thrushes. Ovenbirds are large thrush, like the Louisiana waterthrush that Anne spoke about. They are on the larger end of warblers. Ovenbirds have an orange and black racing stripe effect on their head. They have a large eye with a bold white eye ring around. And as they walk, they tend to hold their short tail upwards at a jaunty angle. They walk along the ground primarily as they forage, which is unlike most forest-dwelling warblers. They walk instead of hopping. Some have even described their walking gait like that of a little chicken, which is pretty cute when you're out there in the woods and you see this little ovenbird. Their current population is also stable, estimated at 26 million individuals. Ovenbirds use on the breeding habitat, they use mature deciduous forest with an open understory, and leaf litter is very important to them. The forest types that they will often use hardwoods, but they'll sometimes use mixed hardwood and conifer forest as well. And it's important for them to have undisturbed expanses of forest for breeding success. When they nest, they build a Dutch oven-like nest on the forest floor, hence their name, Ovenbird. The nest is woven from grasses, hair, bark, other plant materials, and then the female covers that nest with dead leaves for camouflage. Sort of mounded it up. It's very, very difficult to find these ovenbird nests. You would not see it if you're just walking through the woods, but at a close-up view of it, it would look like a very, very small Dutch oven. In the wintering time of year, ovenbirds spend their time in Central America and the very northern part of South America, as well as the Caribbean and southern Florida. Primary threats to ovenbirds are habitat fragmentation and loss, as well as collisions. As Jordan mentioned, they are a super collider with a high rate of collision with windows during migration, and cats outdoors also prey upon ovenbirds. Ovenbird's song is very loud, very distinctive. It sort of sounds like teacher, 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 and it progressively gets louder as the song goes on. Very interesting, neighboring ovenbird males will often sing together. One male will start singing, and then the second one will join in right after. They'll pause and then sing one right after the other again for up to 40 songs. The second ovenbird will join in so quickly that oftentimes it'll sound like just one bird is singing. I'll play their song here and you can follow along with this sonogram. Very loud, very clear. To me, this is very reminiscent of walking through the northern forests in the Great Lakes region. Finally, I'll speak on the common yellowthroat, the final of the 3 warblers I'm covering today. Common yellowthroats, their current population is estimated at 77 million birds, which is numerous, but slightly declining. Common yellowthroats, the males have a bandit-like look with a black mask, and the males have a pale border above that black mask with a yellow throat and brownish yellow underside. They act a lot like wrens. They're very small warbler. They skulk around in thick vegetation, and they're very quick to move, very sneaky. Male common yellowthroats will perform a display flight that is similar to that of a yellow-breasted chat, where the male ascends upwards while twittering a jumble of high-pitched notes and then drops back down into thick vegetation cover. The female common yellowthroat, as you can see here, lacks that distinct black mask. And common yellowthroats, they use a wide variety of habitats, all with thick vegetation though. Most commonly, they're found in shrubby wetlands, but they also use overgrown meadows, prairies, pine forests. And as you can see on the range map, they're very widespread across North America during the breeding season. Common yellowthroats nest on or near the ground. And they're very sneaky in order to protect their nest location. So the adult bringing food to their nestlings, they'll enter thick vegetation near their nest, sneak quietly over to the nest, then deliver the food to the young, and finally depart by another route entirely. And the wintering time period, they use habitat very similar to that of the breeding grounds in densely vegetated areas. And they'll winter in the southern US, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Common yellowthroats are susceptible to habitat degradation and loss. Also, poor water quality and pesticides that impact insects will impact common yellowthroats. They're insectivorous and they often live in wetland habitat. They're also highly prone to collisions during migration. Common yellowthroat's song is clear and oscillating, sort of sounds like a witchety sound. They're very vocal. They're one of our most numerous warblers, and given their occurrence across wide habitat types, you may already have come across a common yellowthroat. They also have a distinct call note, which I'll play their song and note here. And with that, briefly, I just want to mention the work that the ABC foresters and biologists in the Great Lakes region, we focus on a wide range of habitat types. And in this region, there's a lot of habitat for warblers. It's a lot of diverse forested habitat ranging from northern hardwoods or deciduous forests to conifer dominant forests. There's many different habitat types in the region as well, including wetlands, grasslands, pine oak barrens, and more. So with this diversity of habitat types, there are many habitat elements that support breeding bird populations. Finally, as Jordan mentioned, the boreal forests and northern hardwoods are, they have an abundance of insects during the spring and summer months, which is an excellent source of food, particularly caterpillars, the larvae of butterflies and moths. So many warblers depend on these caterpillars to feed their young during the breeding season. In the Great Lakes region, ABC has had continued success in improving, restoring, and enhancing forested habitat to benefit a broad suite of bird species. Much of our focus to date has been to address species of greatest conservation need, including 3 warblers, the golden-winged warbler, Kirtland's warbler, and cerulean warbler. The habitat work that we have done to support these 3 species also benefits American redstarts, ovenbirds, common yellowthroats, and many more. And we've done this by working with public landowners and private landowners to manage thousands of acres of habitat across the region. We do a lot of managing for healthy forests with a diversity of tree species, forest age classes, and habitat elements. And we managed to improve resilience to threats. Golden warblers use young, early successional forest openings. And in the same type of habitat, you'll commonly find American redstarts and common yellowthroat, for example, in alder wetlands or in young regenerating aspen stands. Kirtland's warblers use young, dense jack pine forests. And finally, cerulean warblers use oak-dominated forests with enough canopy gaps to allow sunlight down to the forest floor, which is really good for insect abundance as well as nest placement in the dense leafy branches. Like cerulean warblers, ovenbirds just depend on undisturbed expanses of mature forest for breeding. Touching briefly again on some of the threats to these warbler species, habitat loss includes fragmentation of habitats as they are converted, developed, or broken into smaller parcels. Habitat degradation might occur with the invasion of non-native plants or forest pests, which includes insects or diseases. And many of these threats are exacerbated by climate change. Collisions with window glass is a major threat to many migrating warblers, especially during the spring and the fall. And finally, cats that are outdoors are a big threat to birds, especially to young birds who aren't able to fly right away, and also to migrating birds refueling on their migrations. Some actions that you can consider to support birds are focusing on improving habitat, whether that's at the scale of your yard or at a bigger scale if you own or manage land. You can make a big difference by planting native plants, learning more about birds and their habitat needs, and seeking guidance on managing your forests. Forestry for Birds initiatives can help you to learn about birds that use forested habitat, about habitat elements, and also many resources to learn more about what you can do. And we'll be sharing the Forestry for Minnesota and Minnesota Birds links in the chat, but there's also several other states with Forestry for Birds initiatives in different regions. And finally, at home, you can help reduce bird collisions with glass by some simple decals or window tape, installing screens, and by reducing light pollution during spring and fall migration. Also at home, you can keep your cats indoors, and you can choose to share information with your friends and neighbors about the impacts of cats to birds. And with that, I will hand it back over to Jordan, who will wrap up this webinar.
Thanks so much, Linnea. Time is flying by just like these migrating warblers, but I want to invite Anne back for one question. And that is, what is one thing that you hope everyone will take away from this webinar and share with a friend?
I hope everyone shares that just migration is such an amazing, it's just an amazing time to be outdoors and to listen, right? When you're out there, because you're going to hear so many songs and things you're not familiar with. And it's just embrace that. It's just get outdoors and enjoy.
Thanks, Anne. And Linnea?
I think folks can take away from this webinar that warblers, though they might be intimidating and challenging to learn, you can do it. And it's really exciting to see the diversity, no matter where you're located or what time of year you're looking for these birds.
And I have to contribute. It's to get a hat. You all are so wonderful for joining our webinar and celebrating warblers with us, and we hope that you continue doing so. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. All registrants will receive a link to the recording via email in just a few days, and the conservation efforts that you've heard about today are only possible thanks to folks like you, members and supporters, who care about birds and believe in ABC's mission to conserve them. Together, we can do even more to save wild birds and the habitats they need to thrive. And if you're not an ABC member right now already, will you be? Please consider making a gift right now to make a difference for wild birds across the Americas and to get the hat. It's only $35, but you have to sign up right now today to receive it. And you'll also have your gift doubled up to $200,000 thanks to our current appeal. I really hope that this hat migrates its way to your home this spring and then out into the field with the warblers as well. It's a great way to show everyone that you are being bold for birds with American Bird Conservancy. Thank you again for caring about birds and sharing American Bird Conservancy's mission to conserve them. Good birding.